Hi, I'm Danica Tormohlen, VP of Group Content for Corporate Event News, and I'm joined today by Natasha Miller, who is an author, entrepreneur, and corporate event expert. As the founder and CEO of Entire Productions, a multi-million dollar event production company, DMC, and event booking agency, she brings decades of experience to her new book that just launched. When was the launch date, Natasha?
April 8th.
April 8th. So we are thrilled to have her here. She wrote a new book called Corporate Event Mastery. So welcome, Natasha.
Hey, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Just wanted to show the cover. Really fun. Someone actually recently just said, is this a corporate event murder mystery? And I was like, no, it isn't, but that's a great idea for my next book.
It is a good idea. I think there's a lot of good fiction ideas from behind the scenes. It could be a good tell. Let's jump right in. Your book is specifically on in-house corporate event professionals.
Mhm.
What unique challenges do these planners face compared to, let's say, third-party planners? And how does corporate event mastery address these distinct needs?
That's a great question because the answer I thought would be was something is actually different after interviewing these various corporate event planners from Salesforce, Mansueto Ventures, a pharmaceutical company, and the biggest challenge that these people have. So we're talking a very specific niche, right? These are people that work inside mostly Fortune 500 companies as an event planner, manager, director. Maybe they're in marketing, maybe they're in communications, maybe they're in HR. The biggest challenge they have is that they are understaffed and not supported by their company. And that blew my mind. Some companies are very well staffed, but the majority I'm hearing from who I selected, they don't have a big team. One of the people that I talked to does anywhere from 52 alone events a year. And then one person was responsible for up to 100. And now within those numbers, not everyone is a large scale event. You can call a dinner or a lunch and learn an event, but still there are logistics, there are vendors, there is load in, there's so much to do that it was unfathomable to me that companies place this emphasis on their event marketing, both internally and externally, as part of an integrated marketing plan, but don't support the person or the couple of people in the organization doing it.
With resources and basically budget for staffing.
Yeah.
So how do you address their needs then? Do you help them with this book to figure out how to manage
Yes.
when you are short staffed?
In so many ways, I think each chapter has something to do with supporting them in their role. I try to help that professional up level themselves by suggesting different kinds of education tracks. So if you're an event planner, you might not think, oh, I need to know about sales, I need to know about marketing, or I need to know about C-level meetings. But to really show your value and prove your worth, you need to have an idea of those things. And the more you know about that, the more valuable you are. And also, I talk to a lot of event planners when we're helping them with their events, and we'll start them with a strategy session and say, okay, why is your company doing this event? And what are the KPIs that they're looking for and measuring against? And what's your ultimate ROI? And sometimes the answer is, oh, I don't know, which I can understand because there's not enough support. They're here and they have a manager who has a manager who might have a manager too, or somewhere up there is the C-suite level, and the information isn't coming down. So I try to encourage them to find a seat at the table, get the seat at the table. Among other things, there's templates and systems and processes, but for the majority of the response to that question, that's it.
It does seem to be, and it has been that way, I think, for a while, that there's a disconnect, right, from the C-level down to the actual event organizer. And since sometimes it's not generating revenue or it's a cost center, it falls down in the priority list. But it is such a valuable marketing channel, and also you can develop such great relationships with your customers and prospects
Mhm.
at these corporate events, right? So the ROI is there. It's
I
just,
also think
quantifying it, right?
I also think that internal events is an internal marketing strategy that should be really taken advantage of. So attracting great people to your organization, but also keeping them so in love with your organization because it costs so much money to replace one person. So I know the C suite knows this, but by the time it gets down the ladder and there's budgets being balanced, it sometimes it falls off the radar. And it's not necessarily the C suite's sole job to keep it on the radar. So what I'm trying to say is this is actually your job to
Yeah,
say,
your
hey, I need a seat here and I need it early and I need it to be in there while the decisions are being made and maybe even be part of that decision making process.
Yeah, agreed. I'm going to jump to an aside just because I think you might appreciate this. So, yesterday, my company, Informa, had a work internal event that I thought was just great. It was a 5K walk, brought your dog to a lunch during the day. And it was at a place called Bar K, which is basically a restaurant bar with a dog park at it.
Oh, nice.
So super cute. And then raised money for a local charity. And then they matched a certain percentage of the funds that were raised. So again, like internal events like that keep your
Yeah.
employees like happy and wanting to get together during the day. Also, I think it's another thing, not necessarily everything doesn't have to be like a Christmas party or around alcohol, daytime type of thing. So, a variety of activities for all of your different types of employees.
Just the fact that you're talking about it shows the value of that event. And it was innovative. There was an experience design element, there was a human element. Your company understands that dogs are very important to their owners. We all know that. But sometimes C suite are like, we don't care.
Yeah.
Great. I love my dog too. But putting that all together is going to keep the people in your company sticky. And it will be one of the many pinpoints that keep them engaged.
Yeah, then they're great icebreakers for people that like networking or whatever. People come up, pet your dog, ask about your dog. That's what I was doing to meet new friends that I don't know colleague wise. Okay, I digress. You mentioned demonstrating ROI and proving internal value as a key theme in the book. Can you share one or two specific frameworks or metrics you recommend for corporate event planners to
Yeah.
better quantify their event success?
I think people think of KPI and ROI in terms of monetary, which is absolutely a thing and should be really considered. But for internal engagement, it could be how, you know, if they're surveyed after, what is their feeling about the company? And there's ways of asking it that isn't so blatant. And ahead of time, the KPI would be we want this many people to answer this survey because 100% isn't. And you can figure out ways to incentivize them to answer the survey. And then two, so I'm going to keep it small too. The KPI could be we want a 9 or we want an 8 out of 10 score. So if you place those ahead of time, then you can measure against them. If you don't think of it and you don't create your survey at the beginning, then at the end you're like, what should we ask them to like level up to the outcomes we actually wanted? It's too late,
Yeah.
right? And so the ROI could be a sentiment rating. It could be how many people had ahas or how many people met a new person at work or something like that. So that's an internal way. And you can think about that along the lines with the KPIs. If you do a financial thing, how many people registered, how many people actually showed up, what was the revenue generated if you're doing a ticket sales. Now, doing a sales, like a launch or a sales event, you have to measure immediately, then 3 months, then 6 months, then 9 months. You can't just put it all in that. We only got 2 calls after the event because the sales cycle is likely a little longer. But then you have to have systems and processes in place to capture that information. Great that you've captured it, but then how are you going to present it? So it's a lot to think of And I can understand why it would be hard for some companies to justify it because it's just more work. But it shows the power of event marketing and events in a workplace. And if you are an event producer in your organization and you're rolling this up to the stakeholders, they're going to be like, wow, we don't really see this initiative that much. So, can you
Yeah.
imagine for your own role, that means potential role changes, raises. So I think that it's important to think about continuing education for like CMP and CSCP is great, but then there's a whole nother layer.
Good points. I take away from that. I definitely heard it doesn't have to be only monetary, right? Revenue generated. The KPIs can be a variety of things like sentiment, percentages, and then also it's like a chicken and the egg, right? If you won't get a seat at the table if you don't track these things and show your value and the value to the company and to the employees and to sales, et cetera.
I still hear from high level event producers at large corporations or organizations, associations, that they're sometimes still referred to as, oh, that's our party planner. And parties are wonderful and party planners are great, but that is not their role. And it's a derogatory term. And I think it's up to our industry to educate and level up into that.
Yeah. And ROI and KPIs is one way to do that. I think the best probably way to do that to prove your value. Okay. The book also features interviews with internal event producers across a variety of industries. What was one of the most surprising or counterintuitive insights that emerged from these conversations that might challenge conventional event planning wisdom?
Hmm. There wasn't a tremendous counterintuitive, nothing happened that way except for I thought people would really be challenged with their systems and processes and lack of support for a system and lack of documentation and such. And everyone has a system and process, whether it's tight or well done or not, is the question. But that wasn't the overarching. And so that was the big surprise. My subtitle is Strategies and Solutions for Corporate Event Professionals in High Demand Roles. Before, it had something to do with systems and processes and cutting through the chaos. So it was really nice to hear that is not the number one or number two problem.
Great. That is interesting. Yes, I'm sure there is a variety of processes like Excel spreadsheets, as something as simple as that, all the way to maybe too many event tech systems to deal with. Okay. As both a successful agency owner and now an author, you've seen events from multiple perspectives. So, how has leading entire productions influenced your approach to writing this playbook for
Ah,
internal corporate event planners?
okay, so this is actually my second book. I wrote a book 3 years ago. It's the story of my life. It is called Relentless. And I didn't have any ideas of writing another book after. It's like, it's not as easy as having a baby and then forgetting about it and then having another one. It's like that was a 5 year process. It was a learning process. It was emotionally draining. It was wonderful, but it was a lot. So I didn't even think about this until last, like late summer. And then I was realizing some of my own frustrations and desires for our clients is that when I hear them say, I don't know what the KPIs or the ROI is, even if we run them through a strategy session, sometimes they're guessing and sometimes they have to ask, and sometimes they don't even get a great answer from their manager. So I like to mentor, I like to share the wealth of knowledge that I have. And so I just started, I had written some articles for Entrepreneur and Inc. magazine and for BizBash and for Smart Meetings. And I just thought I like writing. I like sharing my knowledge. I've written a book before. And as an entrepreneur during the pandemic, I also opened a publishing company, but I've had to close that down to outside clients because I've got too much going on. Why not? So I started writing in October 1st. I gave myself a deadline of December 31st for the first draft. I met that deadline, but I then spent the next couple of months really refining and making it even better. And I love to say this, I knew I would put out a good product because I wouldn't put out a product at all. But this book turned out even better than I had ever imagined it to be. And I think it's because I did that 3-month goal and I made it. So stamp. And then I had a couple of months to really refine it and think about, if this book were written for me, what would I want from it? Right. And then I created some templates and I made sure that the design of the book, when you're reading it, is easy and accessible to do, like visually. So I gave myself that extra time, and that's part of the magic that made it the even better than I thought it would be.
I bet it was a little bit easier to write a how-to book than it was to write your memoir, I'm gonna
Um,
guess.
Vastly easier emotionally. Not
Yeah,
there was definitely it was easier to write this book, period, but it wasn't easy. And that was
right.
another surprise. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I thought this was gonna be easier." It is easier, but it's not. Maybe book number 3, and then 4 and 5 will be like a cakewalk. I have no plans.
That's pretty fast though, timeline to
It's
start
very
in
fast.
October, have your first draft done by
Yeah,
the end of December, and then refine it for 2 months and it's out right now. That's
it's
pretty
very
impressive.
fast, but I have a COO in my company that is really great at making the business run. I don't work in it day to day. I'm not working with most of our clients one on one. My team is. So if you can think about, what do I do all day? I'm mentoring and developing and mentoring the team and the new people, creating and upholding culture, and writing a book.
So are you saying your COO was like, you have this window and that's it, and then you need to we need
No,
you
no,
back
no.
doing other stuff?
The COO he's doing 75% of what I was doing for the first 20 some years of my business.
Congratulations on that,
Thank you.
on your second book. Now I'm going to want to read you, go back and read your memoir. Okay, just a couple more questions for you. Looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for in-house corporate event teams to elevate their strategic role within their organizations in the next 2 to 3 years?
If you think about what we just talked about, let's just say anybody who comes across the book and reads the book, if they actually take a couple of the steps that include getting a seat at the table. If you don't make it to C-suite, it's okay. There are places to go. That alone, if we did that across the country, would start to raise the bar and raise the tide, right? It only needs to be one thing, but it doesn't have to be that one same thing. I think the event industry isn't tremendously sophisticated, which is fine, but it's time now to step into a little bit more education, up leveling, not professionalism, because I think everyone's professional, but thinking maybe in that corporate mindset, because events can still slide by as you don't necessarily have to wear the suit to work. You don't necessarily have to be on site every day, but stepping into that sophistication, not all the way, doesn't need to be, I think would be really great for the industry completely.
Good advice. Okay, we'll end on a couple of fun ones here.
Okay.
So, I read her bio before we did the interview, and I noticed that she is a classically trained musician. And I learned before we came on camera that she went to University of Kansas as well.
Mhm.
And you turned to an event industry leader. What's the most unexpected way your musical background has helped you in corporate event
Oh,
planning?
oh my gosh. I think it's been an incredible training ground. So you have to be super disciplined to be a classical musician, because to get good, you have to lock yourself in a practice room by yourself, playing scales and arpeggios and classical music as it was written exactly by that composer. You cannot innovate or change anything up, or you get tisk from the conductor, right? So there's discipline there, and then there's also very complex thinking. So as a musician, for me as a violinist, I'm playing sometimes very fast passage for a couple of bars. While I'm playing that, I have to be ready for the 4 to 6 bars after that. So it's like driving. Of course, you don't want to hit the car in front of you, but you have to pay attention to the speed and all other things. That definitely set up for a good event planner. Then there's that systems and processes and analytical side, which you think of musicians as creatives, and creatives typically don't have the side of the brain that wants to do logistics and I dotting and T crossing. But as a classical musician, I think there's a segue there. And being a musician is why my company exists. So entire production started as an entertainment booking agency, period, full stop, end of story. We grew into the name Entire Productions over the course of 25 years, and we are celebrating our 25th year of being in business this year. And I think playing weddings, a lot of corporate events, a lot of nonprofit events as a violinist in my string quartet, as a jazz vocalist with my band. I was being booked all the time. And then I just ended up with this entertainment booking company. What we ended up doing was doing such a good job micro planning for our event planner or the internal person. They said, "You guys are amazing. Why don't you plan our event?" And I said no for so long because I didn't want to alienate our clients by becoming their competition. The beautiful thing that happened was in about 2015, I started saying yes. And our competitors, which are really our colleagues and our partners, still use us today for the entertainment side. But I think that fear that kept me from going into event production was fine. Everything has its time, and the time wasn't until about 2015.
Congrats on 25 years in business.
Thank
And
you.
I can see how being classically trained you're playing what's in front of you, but looking ahead and getting every note right down to the last one. Perfect. I can see it as a great background for what you're doing now. Okay, one final question for you,
Okay.
Natasha. You've produced events for major corporations and have now written a Wall Street Journal bestseller. What's the most memorable or amusing behind the scenes moment from your career that taught you a valuable lesson in event planning?
Okay, hold on a second. Okay, here it is. Something is always going to go wrong, no matter what kind of event. It's a small one, a big one. And the bigger ones, usually it's going to be something like it's going to feel catastrophic. And this is what I learned. I learned that, and my team knows this, I'll say something's going to go wrong. You don't know what it is. You'll never know ahead of time. But that's why we ask our clients to not make any changes. And this is really hard to do, but if you say it at the very beginning, no changes 2 weeks out. That's it. No changes of slides, no changes of content. I don't care. You have $50,000 more to spend. Sorry. That's what we want, because in that 2 weeks, we're doing all the finishing touches. And when that thing that is going to happen, it could happen within those 2 weeks, it could happen on site, it could happen during the event. You have the bandwidth to take on that challenge and fix it. If you let your client take you through to, like, during the event, they're changing things, you don't have that space to make those decisions. And I can think of many, in fact, almost every event had something that happened because it involves people, right? And then acts of God, and there's things you just can't control. But knowing that there's going to be something there and preparing for it mentally, maybe physically, to attend to it is, I think, a great lesson. And it's very freeing for especially my team to understand and know, okay, something's going to go wrong. Don't know what it is. It's going to be small, it's going to be big, but my company understands this is the nature of the business, so they don't have to fear for their jobs or whatever. Now, I think maybe I might scare some of the newer people because they're like, okay, what is it going to be? What is it going to be? And sometimes it's really small enough that they're like, did it happen? Did we have the thing that went wrong? Which is great when it's that small, right?
I've not heard that tip before, so that's a good one. Do most of your clients agree to that?
It's really the way you position it. And let me say this without having my team want to kill me. When I get in the room with the client and I present it to them with the history I have with events, and the way that we manage them, it can happen. Of course, the client is paying, et cetera, et cetera. You could be the kind of person who said, listen, if you don't want to do this and you think you're going to make changes 2 weeks ahead, we're not the team for you. That's another way of positioning it. Then you're putting it on them to say, no, no, I'm going to get my stuff together. We'll be fine. So then you have an agreement there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Psychological warfare is really good.
But a good tip for people, because that I've heard variations of that. No more new ideas at this point. We can't execute something new at this point. When is that cutoff point? And 2 weeks out seems fair enough. And if you get that buy-in on the front end, a good piece of advice there. So thank you so much for joining us today, Natasha.
It was really a great pleasure and great questions.
Thank you. So for Corporate Event News, I'm Danica Tormohlen.